In there, we provided money through our home program, through Washington County, and we also provided funds through the Shelter Plus Care program, the rental assistance, that pays ongoing costs, which is a very important aspect, and some capital money toward the construction. So I mean, all these buildings kind of blend in with the location. They're just something that's nice. They're new, they're modern, they're efficient, they're designed for the population you want to serve. And granted, these are all organizations that have been at it for a while, but it's something to think about in the development of a project. Some other projects in Minnesota that are for youth that I want to point out: Freeport West Project Solo has been around for many years, even before Rich worked there. And it provides leasing to homeless youth. Usually they're, I believe they were 18 or older. They might have been down to 16. Was it 16?
Yeah.
And we provided funds for some of the youth, so they had to conform to our definition of homeless. It was a transitional program. It is a transitional program, but the idea is they would generally try to lease a unit that the youth could afford to take over on their own at some future date. And they would provide them with support services, case management, give them living skills. I remember one time I did go out there to monitor. It was really neat. I met a young woman who was a true orphan. Both her parents had passed away. And there was a picture of her shaking hands with Bill Clinton in the White House. She had gone to National Girls Nation or something like that. It was just really touching. I mean, she was hooked up now with the University of Minnesota at the time, and for such a sad background, she was doing well. And besides losing her parents on separate occasions, she also had lost a sister on a third occasion. So she had a very challenged life, but kind of inspiring to see her there shaking the hands of the president. Arrowhead, they have a little leasing program in there. Salvation Army has a mixed-use, again, a mixed-use project located in St. Paul that we've participated in. Lutheran Social Services has a number of projects. There's one in St. Paul, there's one in Duluth. Those tend to be with a specific building, and then they have a rental program that we funded, that just started up in Wilmer last year. So they have a number, and then there's a small program in Duluth. Now there are other youth programs around Minnesota, but these are the ones that I'm aware of and that I know that we have direct funding. So I just wanted to point that out. Our monies can be used in a number of ways. It can be used for capital, it can be used for operating, it can be used for support services, depending on what the needs are of your particular project. And what our notice of funding availability. I would say we provide housing basically through one of two avenues. One is through capital development, where we give money to help build or rehab a building, and then we provide money for operating of that property, and then some money towards support services. Every deal is different, so how that comes about and our role is different. The other big avenue we see nowadays is rental assistance or leasing, where either the organization rents a building or apartments, or they work, the tenant, the youth rents an apartment, but the organization pays out either all of the rent or the difference between the youth's contribution and what the market rates for those rents are. If you're familiar with the Section 8 program in rental assistance, it's similar to that, but it's a little more flexible, a little more user-friendly, I would say. And we're much more forgiving of their past indiscretions. There was a discussion about who's eligible for this programs, housing authorities, nonprofits. As far as how we define homelessness, well, I don't get to define it. people in Washington get to define it. And so it's Congress and then the administration. Our definitions tend to be much more literal than anybody else's right now. And it's basically those who are on the street. And that includes any place that's just not fit for a human being to live in, a car, a campground, you know, something that you're not designed to live through in the Minnesota winter. It could be also an emergency shelter, battered shelters, drop it, you know, something on that, and very short term. Those are basically who we're working with. Now, this is an area that may be in transition because of the HEART Act and some of the changes of how we might define homelessness or what criteria you would have to establish to prove that you qualify for the program. And so this is another reason why, say if you're developing a 10 or 15 unit project, you might say, you know, maybe I don't agree with HUD's definition totally, or that would cut out some of the people I want to serve, so maybe I'll just say, well, I'll dedicate 10 of the 15 units or 7 of the 15 units to the HUD program, and the other ones I'll fund some other way and I can use a different definition, or, you know. So that's something to think about. Besides that, lots of times our money isn't that great anyhow in the quantity, so you may have to go to a lot of other funders to get the program together that you want. So it's just something to think about.
What is the age for HUD definition? For
Of youth? My age plus 2 years. We don't really define youth. So in some some documents they've said 18 or younger, because once you're 18, you know, legally you're an adult. I think you just have to pick what makes sense for who you want to serve. And there may be some state issues that come, because, you know, if you're serving 19-year-olds, you might not be subject to some licensing issues that you might if you're trying to serve 12-year-olds.
So HUD doesn't say at this age. I have 2 federal grants, and both of them are very specific about ages.
Well, and that might be from what department they come from.
Yeah, they're FISBE grants.
Hmm?
They're from the Federal Youth Service Bureau.
Okay, so, you know, they probably have legislation and stuff.
Okay, yeah.
But I like that first definition.
Yeah, that's good.
And an uncle, his idea of old was anybody that's 5 years older than him. He was using that until he was in his late 70s. So. Anyhow, yeah, so some flexibility there. And so that's something to think about too, is your sources of funding may hamstring you or free you up. So you want to be careful in pursuing the money that you don't end up with only 2 people in all of Minnesota that are eligible for your development.